Today's session, we are going through a great topic with Mr. Paul Stevens that will walk you through the understanding and developing organizational culture. And one of the key outcomes is to understand the meaning of culture and connect the importance of culture to strategy and performance. Paul J. Stevens, known as PJ, is a purpose-led change consultant, coach, and facilitator. He has nearly 20 years of experience working with clients to understand and deliver change more effectively and efficiently. This session is designed to introduce the topic and meaning of corporate culture and examine the value of culture in business, why it matters, and how to better understand and develop it. At the end of this session, we'll be having a live Q&A and an Amazon voucher rewarded quiz through Kahoot that I will take you through. So let's start our fruitful session by welcoming Mr. Paul Stevens.
Thank you. What a wonderful introduction, Manatala. That's so kind. When I hear somebody else say that I've been in business 20 years or been in this particular field 20 years, it puts a smile on my face because it doesn't feel like that. But actually, it's in excess of 20 years I've been working with a variety of customers. I won't say globally, but certainly UK, Europe, Middle East, Far East, and occasionally the States. There's a few places I haven't worked or clients that aren't based in. And some of these clients, as you can see, they are global. And others are more regionally based. So I hope as we go through today to provide you with some use, some value in from this thing called culture, which is ever more important. It's being talked about a lot more, but suddenly there seems to be a focus on understanding it and developing it and really bringing it to life so that businesses get the value through people from the culture. So today our objective then is understanding and developing culture. What is it? How can we change it? And where do we start? And I'd invite you, when you listen to the next sort of 90 minutes or so together, think about what is the single most important factor for you in your business. What is it that you really want to understand regarding culture? Where perhaps could you make some easy wins yourself? Where will you get value? Why does this matter? So please, this is a participative session. Yes, I'm going to do most of the work, but there are some points where I'm going to invite you, please, to share your thoughts. But primarily, I really would invite you to be engaged. So if you've got, phones on, or you've got several laptops and computers, maybe you could, just turn them off, or just shut the screen so that you can focus on this hour and a half. Because I really want it to be of value to you. You've taken time out your busy schedule, and I want to do that justice for you. When we run these sessions, or when I run culture programs, clients often say, my colleagues around here think that culture is a nebulous thing. And we hear that we need to move from theory to reality. And I hope during this session, there are a couple of things. One is that you'll find out that it's not nebulous. We really can understand culture. We can measure it. We can design it. We can create it. We can live it. And I want to show you how to move from theory to reality, which in many ways can be quite simple. Let's say simple because I'm bringing it from 20 plus years experience. So have a think then. What information would you need for your business case if you wanted to make a compelling, if you wanted to make an idea compelling, get buy-in in a budget for change? What would you need to know? And whilst I'm talking, if you want to pop that into chat, just have a think. What's something that you need to know about culture? What is it that you would really like to get from today's session? And if you pop it in chat, I'll try and review that and try and answer those questions. But we do have, as we do have Q&A at the end. So with 20 odd years experience in change, particularly culture, leader and strategy, I'm also an expert in de-risking change. So any change like cultural change is expensive, it's risky, it's hard work. And we know this because there's many surveys that tell us this. I think it's something like 80% of change programs fail, but it doesn't have to be that way. And one of the best ways I think of doing that is to tap into the knowledge and creativity and potential that exists in business, in you, me, we, us, and really bring culture to life and live change. There's so much potential in business that we can use. And I work with a collective of people. Whilst today it's just me, I work with a collective of people, some with as much as 40 years personal experience. To say I'm only at 20, so we really do have significant skills and experience that you can draw upon. And the reason we work in a collective is just that we like to do our own work, but we also like to come together and work. So hopefully you'll recognize a couple of logos on there, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them specifically later on. So a quick agenda for the day today, just so you can see off the session. There's two sessions here. There's the understanding.
لدينا جلستان في واحدة. أولا الفهم ومن ثم التطوير. إذا فهم الثقافة وتطوير الثقافة، وربما نستطيع أن نأخذ استراحة قصيرة بين هذين الجزئين. سأطرح أسئلة وأحاول أن أقدم لكم قيمة فعلية من هذه الجلسة، شيء تخرجون به من هذه الجلسة. لنبدأ إذن بالجانب المتعلق بالفهم. لدي السؤال لكم: ما هي الثقافة التنظيمية أو الثقافة المؤسسية؟ ما هي الثقافة المؤسسية؟ كيف تعرفون الثقافة؟
What is your definition of culture, please?
تستطيعون أن تجيبوا على هذا السؤال كتابة عبر الشات. كيف نعرف الثقافة؟ إذا لدينا سؤال: كيف نقيم توازنا بين المألوف والتاريخ والثقافة بينما نعتمد نهجا تقدميا جدا؟ هذا سؤال ممتاز. إذا من فضلكم أجيبوا على سؤالي: ما هو تعريفكم للثقافة المؤسسية؟ كيف تعرفون الثقافة المؤسسية؟ ما هي برأيكم الثقافة المؤسسية؟ نمط حياة؟ نعم. ماذا بعد؟ عندما نتحدث عن ثقافة، كيف تفهمون الأمر؟ ما الذي تفهمونه بثقافة مؤسسية؟ إذن كيف نقوم بالأمور؟ طريقة العمل. نعم، شكرا رامي. إنها عبارة عن معتقدات، عادات، تقاليد. كيف نتحدث إلى بعضنا البعض، كيف نحل مشكلاتنا. كذلك يعجبني الجزء المتعلق بالعمل المشترك أو ما تعتمده المجموعة بشكل مشترك. هذا ممتاز. إذن الثقافة عبارة عن طريقة عمل في معظم الأحيان. يمكننا أن نسمع عبارات طنانة، وبالطبع كلمة ثقافة رائجة جدا. يمكن أن تكون الثقافة عبارة عن قوة نحو الخير أو الشر. ماذا أقصد بذلك؟ عملت على حالة كانت الثقافة تركز على الإنفاق، على نفقات السفر، وكان علي أن أشرح للأشخاص المعنيين التفاصيل المتعلقة بهذا الأمر، وبالتحديد كيف يمكن أن نلتف على النفقات. إذن يمكنكم أن تفهموا الثقافة بالدرجة الأولى لتعرفوا ما تحتاجون إليه في مرحلة لاحقة. إذا نحن نتحدث هنا عن افتراضات مشتركة والتي تحدد طريقة عمل الشركة، كيف نتصرف، تحدد للموظفين ما عليهم فعله حين لا يكون الرئيس في ضيف في الغرفة، تحدد الثقافة كيف تعامل المؤسسة موظفيها، وكذلك الأمر بالنسبة للعملاء والمجتمع الأوسع. لا يختص مع الموظفين سواء كانت صارحة أم لا، فالثقافة موجودة دائما ولا يمكن أن نعبر عنها ببساطة في العمليات. وسأشرح لكم في وقت لاحق العمليات التي تسمح لنا بفهم الثقافة، ولكن في نهاية المطاف الثقافة هي ما نقوم به وطريقة عملنا المشتركة. ويمكن أن نفهم الثقافة بوصفها ثقة يصعب علينا أن نبنيها ويسهل أن نكسرها أو نفقدها ويصعب أن نغيرها. ربما تستطيعون أن تدونوا هذه الملاحظات. لكي تكون الثقافة مجدية ينبغي أن تكون حقيقية وشفافة، ومن غير الغريب أن نرى شركات تقوم بإعداد شعار للثقافة، ولكن إن لم تضم الجميع إلى هذه الثقافة فهي بالتالي هذه الثقافة بالتالي ليست حقيقية. يمكننا أن نحدد ما نريده في الثقافة، ولكن لن تكون الثقافة حقيقية إن لم يكن الجميع يعيشها من رأس الهرم إلى قاعدته. ينبغي أن يعبر عنها كل الموظفين، أن تلهم الموظفين، وحين يصطف الجميع خلف مهمة معينة، خلف رسالة معينة ونسميها ثقافة، يمكن أن يرتقوا بهذا الشعور، وهذه الثقافة توحد الجميع خلف هدف معين وتساعد الموظفين على المشاركة في الثقافة بطريقة إيجابية. وهذه المساهمة مهمة جدا، هذا الجانب مهم جدا. فنحن كبشر نريد أن نشارك، نريد أن نحدث فرقا وأن نحدث أو نقوم بما هو مجد. إذا يمكن أن نرسم معالم الثقافة بشكل متعمد، ويمكن أن نؤثر في الثقافة. وهنا نحن نتحدث عن الثقافة من حيث التصميم وليس الثقافة التلقائية. وعندما نتحدث عن الثقافة التلقائية لا نتحدث عن ذلك بشكل سلبي، ولكن ربما قد تكون تلك الثقافة التي نفهمها والتي نريدها بالفعل. وبذلك أقصد
culture, a very caring culture, and that's great. There's some great attributes to being friendly and caring. But the opposite of that mean that you might be so friendly and so caring that you don't challenge each other, you don't have difficult conversations, or you don't give and receive feedback. So there's a cost to personal growth as well as the business growth. So culture may be a broad concept. Few people, I believe, really understand it, but it's key to strategic development and the success of your business. Culture will make your brand more valuable to your target customers who will identify with the values, and the culture is what they experience when they call up. It's when they interact with your business. So that's why it's so important to get it right. Culture transpires throughout all your operations. It's in your DNA. It's the way you behave. It will also determine everything from day-to-day productivity to the way you problem solve. And if you think about that with problem solving, if you're in a safe culture, a culture that allows you to share openly and honestly, much easier to problem solve together. If you have a culture where people feel it's not safe to share ideas, or sharing ideas is not rewarded, then they may not do that. Culture has a significant impact on talent attraction and retention, and we'll talk about that a bit later. It's not a buzzword, culture, but it's often used as one, and it's badly interpreted. So culture then, as a colleague of mine talks about, culture is what shapes people to behave the way they do within an organization. It shapes those behaviors. And so if we want to change behaviors, then we need to look at the culture. And culture, as we know, is very different in different companies and different even different offices. Yeah, so it would be very different walking into, say, a Goldman Sachs office to walking into a Google office. You'll notice that meetings will be held in different ways. People will be dressed differently. There may be different paintings, on the walls, different signs of success, for example. And these are all clues to the culture. Having a clear and healthy culture will impact on the business. And a couple of quick ones here. It's proven to make a difference to the P&L, the net profit, and the market share. In short, if you have a force for good, a culture that's a force for good, it helps you outperform the market, outperform the competition. But for us, for you, for me, it makes life easier for us as managers and leaders to get things done in our teams and projects on a day-to-day basis. It saves us time and money and drives up performance. So what's not to like about that? But it's not necessarily easy to do. Yeah. So let's just have a look at this somewhat heavy slide. It might not look a bit It might look a little bit complicated, but let's just spend a moment on it. You know, the world, there's a lot happening in the world. We know that last few years, last 10, 20 years, so much has happened. And there's a lot of instability and change, and within that comes challenges, but also opportunities, as I hope you'll, you know, as I hope we'll discuss. But if we think about that, we've got political and economical, commercial instability. Look at the different trading operations that are available now, the way people are doing things, the way customers are buying. We've got operational unpredictability, a lot of change, shifting talent supply. So we've seen the way that particularly I'm more at the moment, we're seeing a lot in the UK of given that people are now working in a distributed way or a hybrid way, that staff are having a much more powerful influence on how businesses are working, where they're working. So we're seeing people not, you know, wanting to work in different ways and changing businesses too. They're moving to different companies where they feel there's a stronger purpose and set of values. They're much more open about that, which I think is really interesting, because for a long time it wasn't. You know, people followed the money. Now, sure, that's part of it, but they're also following the, you know, the opportunity to work in a better place, a better culture, one where there's a better fit. And maybe we'll see that, you know, sort of more globally. So if we just have a quick sort of whiz round, we've got geopolitical uncertainty, the evolving economic landscape, so weakening energy foundations, you know, fossil fuels. We're driving a lot of electric cars now globally, as we know, ineffective national infrastructure, so transportation, energy, economic models, that's changing. Look how things like iTunes have changed the way that we listen to music or buy music. What about Airbnb? Giving people the opportunity to stay anywhere. So the models that we had have really been changing. We've got shifting stakeholder expectation. And remember a few years ago, VW, Volkswagen Group, I think they were caught cheating with their emissions test. So we've got a lot of this information's available. So we've got distrust in some establishments. Facebook with their data scandal. Yeah. There's an awful lot of things happening in the marketplace that we're now finding out. And Larry Fink from BlackRock, I think this is a really interesting one when he was talking about stakeholders, Larry Fink. I mean, his quote was, "Without a sense of purpose, no company, either public or private, can achieve its full potential. It will ultimately lose," and here's the key one, "it will ultimately lose the license to operate from key stakeholders." So CEOs are also starting to change the landscape. I'm particularly interested as we go around here, reshaping business models. So how people are going to grow, blue ocean versus red ocean, that's perhaps a session for another day. So that, you know, the changing workforce, the characteristics of how we work, what we want, what we're prepared to, if you like, accept, and what we're not. So a heavy slide. But just wanted to say, look, a lot of uncertainty, which we know, but we're also trying just to put some forces around that. So when we think about culture, we have the observable and the unobservable or not observable. Iceberg is a bit of a cliche to some extent. Yes, it's used a lot for a lot of things. But what I want to show you just here is, you know, above the surface, we've got this bit of iceberg that we can see and the observable stuff. So we can see people's behaviors and practice. But deeper down below the surface, you know, in the bigger part of the iceberg, we've got these things like, you know, economics, religion, ideologies, education, beliefs, values, attitudes. And these are a big part of shaping, you know, shaping and actually bringing it to life. You know, what do I actually experience if I come into your business? What will it feel like? And whilst I might not be able to see these things, they will be true. They will exist. So, for example, if we look at how I might drive a culture in a certain business, perhaps this is not a great example, but let me give you an example. I'm very purposeful. I like to do things that are important, not just to the business, but also to the community in which the business exists. I like health and well-being. So could you imagine I was working, say, for a, I don't know, just say for a cigarette company. Let's just make a cigarette company. I don't particularly want people smoking. So my values are to be healthy and well. And I believe that smoking is bad for you. So if those are my beliefs and values, could you see how they might impact on how the culture of the business, how the business would develop? As I say, that's not a great example, but it's an example. Yeah. How might our ideologies, yeah, our education, our beliefs, our real deep-seated beliefs, you know, how do they impact on how we work together, how we speak to each other, yeah, how we support each other? So these things are really important, and we need to address them top down, so behaviors and practice. So for example, like projects and work streams, yeah, how we work together. We will talk about that later. And bottom up, how we interact with people's perceptions and attitudes, beliefs and values, where individual leaders, that's us, you, where they play an invaluable role. We've got to connect with people at the personal level when it comes to culture, shaping it, understanding and developing it. So when we talk about culture, what I thought it might be just useful to do, because there are, you know, listen, we all have our own, in business, we all have our own unique culture, right? But there are some, I suppose, some common types of company culture that we see. So I thought I'd just share this slide. And as we talk through it, just have a think. Perhaps you know some companies with these types of cultures. Perhaps on here, you can think about where your company culture is. May not be all the time, but just, you know, perhaps, you know, predominantly your culture is like one of these things. Now, look, there are many other ways to classify culture. This is just 4, you know, very typical ones. Okay, so we've got clan, which you can see the clan culture, adhocracy, hierarchy, bottom left, and then market. And let me just, some of you will know these, I'm sure already, but let's just talk through a couple. So with clan, top left, clan tends to be very much about, you know, the family environment. Employees come first. Adhocracy, innovation, flexibility, well-paid employees, talented people. So they're putting these things first. They're actually letting people just create. So companies like SpaceX would probably be sitting up there. Yeah. Now they expect people to work hard, but they give them the freedom to do so. Coming down to the bottom 2, market results, market-orientated results, and culture is an interesting one. So tends to be typified by it's highly competitive, a high degree of commitment, high degree of transparency. So in stable markets, these work. And hierarchy perhaps is the one that, you know, from a works better in a very, very stable market. Hierarchy, process orientated, top down, structured, traditional organization. Yeah, many of the businesses I'm sure that you know sort of sit in there. Now what I think is, if I may, is quite useful is if we just look at these, you know, so clan is, you know, fun, happy, it might feel like a great place to work, but it's not always efficient. Employees come first, and that's important. If we get it right for the employees, then what they think, like Zappos, for example, is if we get it right for employees, then the customers will have a great experience too. So the pros of clan are people will feel safe and well. The cons, if you like, the hurdles, might be that we avoid having difficult conversations. Just things just to think about. Disney might sit up here. Disney, they're a customer, you know, they're big on customer experience, aren't they? They like to make the customer happy. And they know that they make the customer happy by having, you know, enthusiastic staff, for example. But it does need to be an effective clan culture, not a toxic clan culture. Maybe we'll pick up on that a little bit later. But all these assume that these are, you know, cultures in the best possible view of each of these 4. Ad hoc or adhocracy, innovative, It's important if you want to make changes, then adhocracy is great. It's fast growth, innovative. The cons, it lacks stability. It often lacks medium-term goals and isn't for everybody. So if people want to be told what to do, if they want structure, if they want well-defined processes, then this may not be for them. This is about the people that want to create the process, change the process, innovate fast. Many startups might start here. And it's often why bigger companies during, like say, like a growth strategy, inorganic growth strategy, buy them for their innovation, their ideas and talent. So think about pharma, medtech, for example. Johnson & Johnson, global pharmaceutical company, have done over 1,000 M&A, 1,000 mergers and acquisitions, looking to buy in these smaller, innovative companies with great ideas and products. And then, of course, the fun can be is how do you integrate a small, innovative, fast-moving adhocracy type culture into a giant such as J&J. Markets and results. So when you want to focus on results, hey, this is the one that you perhaps want to look at. Highly competitive, we say. So the pros are results, KPIs, it's numbers driven. The cons are the internal competitiveness, which needs to be managed, and perhaps the lack of innovation. And hierarchy, hierarchy can be a healthy culture. We often assume that hierarchy is, is I'm being told what to do, and it's not necessarily a great place to work. But it can be if it's done in a healthy and safe way. It's particularly useful in stable markets where there's clarity and certainty. So the pros are efficiency and control, but the cons are probably a lot of bureaucracy. So if you look at that, think about where's your business? And is it the culture that you want? Is it the right culture? So if you've got a lot of hierarchy, how easy is it to make change? How is it to be creative and innovative? So, for example, I often see businesses, so on their website, it will say their values, it will state their values, and one of which is often innovative. But the fact is they're not innovative at all. I mean, they might make some small improvements. If you think about innovate and improve, on a continuum, they might make some little improvements, but no way are they going to innovate because they have so many processes and hierarchy and structure and bureaucracy that no way will they innovate. And if they do try and make changes, it's very slow and it's a long, drawn out affair. They're not agile. They can't move quickly. So writing it actually on a website is pointless. And I've seen a number of people do this. They may aspire to, but they certainly do not live it. And that right back to the beginning when we talk about culture needs to be authentic. I hope that's of use to say there's a lot more to it. And now if we just have a quick look at the the real world, I know we're talking about culture, but let's just think about how the structure, the organizational structure, of today, just what does it actually look like? So on the left hand side, you've got, remember the old organizational chart, org charts, yeah? And you can divvy these up in many ways. For example, some people do it by geography. So, you might have, MENA, Australasia, North America, Africa, however you want to do it, yeah? You might have departments. So do it by, CFO, COO, chief marketing and so on, or maybe do it by products. If it's sportswear, maybe have trainers or sports clothing, tennis rackets. Think of Amir Sports, for example. Yeah. Or maybe you have a matrix of all of them. But just think about what is your structure? But on the right hand side, we've kind of got this network. And with distributed working and work from anywhere, work from home, hybrid working, this is probably more the reality of how people network and share information. And one thing's for sure, if you want to deliver any change at all, you have to understand this. You have to understand, and if you can, map this network, because on the left hand side is what it might look like on paper when you design the org chart. On the right is how it actually works. And so many companies fall foul when they think about what their culture is. They're looking at the org chart on the left. That's not what it is. It's much more on the right. And if you want to make any change, you really need to be looking on the right-hand side. Now, what I mean by this is you can have a CEO or a C-suite who think they make all the decisions or they think they have all the power, but when it comes to change, they don't. Because within organizations, there are people who are popular and they naturally have power, or people gravitate towards them. I don't know, do any of you watch Formula One or like car racing? I don't know if you like Formula One. So one of the teams, Red Bull, run by a guy called Christian Horner. If you like, you can look this up if you're not sure about motor racing. But Formula One, Red Bull, Christian Horner. Christian is particularly good at understanding this right hand. Chums, a guy called Steve Neville worked there for many years. Older guy, retired now, well in his 60s, retired now. But when Christian wanted to make changes or had some ideas, he would go and talk to 2 or 3 of the older guys that he knew had the respect and of people on the engineers, for example. And one of those was Steve. And he'd often go and talk to Steve and share an idea and say, what do you think? Because he knew that if he shared something, other people would also listen to what Steve agree on. And so just understanding who are those 2 or 3 people in the organization can be really, really useful. That's not so easy now with perhaps distributed working. So as leaders, we need to work hard to understand how that works, but get it right. And I promise you, very, very valuable indeed. Right. This is a question. I'd like you to go to chat, please. I'm going to go into chat and I'm going to turn mine on. So go to chat, please. What is your definition or understanding of employee engagement? So 2 questions. Firstly, what is employee engagement? And then if you can, what is the difference between culture and engagement? What is the difference between culture and engagement? So what do we think engagement is? Proactivity. Thank you. Be proactive. So what do you think engagement is, and what is the difference between culture and engagement? Fahad, thank you. What do we think? Right, culture is habits, engagement is putting it in a useful and positive way. Collective versus individual, right. If there's a prize, you should get it. Fahad, thank you, you should get that. It's how employees react. Okay, this is brilliant stuff. So the key difference really is employee engagement. As you said, employee engagement is about the individual. Employee engagement is about the individual's connection and motivation to the company. Engagement, for example, describes how employees feel about the way things work around here. And interventions seek to drive at that sort of sense of belonging and addressing personal aspirations. So that might focus on, say, from a behavioral perspective, your line manager or the leader's relationship, social relationships, alignment with purpose and values. And then you've got like the emotional piece, which is reward and recognition. So do I think I'm being paid fairly? This is engagement. Do I think I'm being paid fairly? And then am I, from a rational perspective, do I have a career path? Am I being trained? Am I learning? Am I growing? Whereas culture, that is about the collective, which is what you said. That's about how everybody behaves, the collective of those behaviors. And the thing with this is you cannot measure or make sense of culture by using engagement surveys. And so often we see people have like an annual appraisal or an engagement survey and think they've understood culture. It is not the same thing. It is, culture and engagement, they're both sides of the same coin, but they are different sides. And this bit's really key. As I say, I'll say it again, you cannot measure culture with an engagement survey. And so many surveys out there ask engagement questions like, do you have a best friend at work? Do you feel you're paid fairly? That's not culture, that's engagement. And that's why we've got these sporting animals running individually. They're running for themselves. They may be running together, but they're running for themselves. So for those who like numbers, proof, not just social proof, but from surveys and global surveys that have been carried out, here's some numbers for you. And funnily enough, what I did find is it's quite hard to find data from the GCC region. Much easier to find from the States because they share, seem to share data more openly, or whether it's because a lot of the big consultancies are based out of there. So some of this is slightly US centric. They are global surveys, but they're often conducted out of the US, for example. So, PwC is global. You'll know some of these. Gartner, for example, I know you would have heard these names. But let's just have a look at some numbers for you. So when you look at this slide, what we're noticing is there's an acceleration towards the importance or acceptance that culture is important. We mustn't just talk about it, we've got to do something about it. And this is happening faster and faster. So here's a couple of numbers for you. PwC, in 2021, their global culture survey discovered, and there's top left, 66%, 2/3, 66% of C-suite executives, so that might be some of you, or it might be some of your line managers. So C-suite and board members believed culture is more important to performance than an organization's strategy or operating model. And later on, we'll talk about Pete Drucker's model, culture eats strategy for breakfast. But now this is actually being recognized. 72% of senior management reported that their culture helps drive successful change initiatives. So if you get it right, much more, a greater likelihood of being able to make changes. In 2019, there was a report by Gartner, and this is top right, 230 billion is spent in the US and about 55 billion in the UK on organizational culture each year. So somebody somewhere thinks this is worth paying attention to. It's a key focus area for businesses. Bottom right-hand corner, I'm sure some of you recognize Buzz Lightyear. They reckon that the next job on the C-suite is going to be the chief purpose officer, the CPO, the chief purpose officer. That's set to be the next major sort of C-suite role. Because organizations are prioritizing the relationship with employees and customers and the communities they operate in. And they're really starting to look more at the role that the business plays in society. So we're going to see the CPO now, we're going to see more Buzz Lightyears. And Forbes identified 2022 this year as the year of workplace culture. So that's going to be the focus for this year. Well, I suppose the question then is really is why should we care? And here's some numbers for you. Why should we care? You've got some financial ones, people, some people one, but just have a look and why these things work and also why these things don't work. So look, there's some numbers for you if you want to make a note. We'll give you these slides, but we'll give you a copy of these. But 4 times increase in revenue, 10 times increase, a 10% increase in customer metrics, 20% in sales, 19% increase in operating income. So when you get this right, the difference is huge. 94% of executives, 88% of employees believe in a distinct workplace culture is important to business success. Distinct means you've got to identify or create it, understand it, deliver it, live it. Isn't just something to be written on the walls here. But you've also got this thing where people are now looking to join a business with culture. 86% of potential employees would not apply or continue to work for a company that they thought had a poor reputation or poor culture. Getting the culture right impacts on absenteeism, And look at that top one, top right-hand corner, people cost 550 billion. I mean, that's a huge amount of money, isn't it? 550 billion. That's the cost of unhappy workers. So we know this stuff's real. We know it's worth doing. What we've got to do now is kind of start to figure out, well, how do we sort of deliver this stuff? And I mean, the numbers are quite shocking. And what we also see, and I've been talking about this for a few years now, is that when I say the current approaches, the approaches over the last sort of 20 odd years, they don't work. They clearly don't work. And the funny thing is, if you go to something like an Ernst & Young, they will tell you that 80 or so % of change management projects fail to meet expectation. Something like 70% of mergers fail in some form or other. And so we know, as I say, that that change is difficult and risky and expensive. So what are we doing about it? A lot of the old methods that we use, they just don't work. So we've got to learn to do things differently. So look, there you go, 69% of employees, bottom left, 69% of employees still do not believe in their organization's definition of their own workplace culture. 85% of employees are not fully engaged. I mean, it's quite scary, really. Bill Kahn, bottom right, I mean, he's been talking about this for 20 years. He's from Boston, Boston University. He's credited as being the founder of employee engagement, really. But in the last 20 years, he says organizations have misdirected their efforts, focusing on how hard employees work for the organization rather than how motivated they are to work with the organization. And so we've got to focus more specifically on how we engage with people and create a culture where people are able to be at their best. Okay, we've got a couple of slides, and then we'll stop just for a few minutes and have a quick break. So if you'd like to go in, if you'd like just to think about this yourself, and I'd really appreciate it if you went into chat and made a couple of points here. But what I'd like you to think about is in the business, in the team that you work in, the team that you lead, or your business on a wider basis, or even perhaps other businesses that you know or do work with, when it comes to culture, what are the pains that you see? What are the pains that you would like to overcome? So is it poor communication, poor decision making, for example? I don't know. What are some of the pains that you experience? Perhaps you feel you're not listened to. I had a chap I was talking to the other day said, I said, what's one of the problems? And he went, nobody listens to me. I don't feel listened to. And he was quite a senior member of the team. But if you look at the culture, they don't have a culture really of listening and paying attention to what other people said. So anyway, so what are your pains? If you want to go into chat, you can drop me a few, make some notes. Thank you. So, well, tell me more about that. The pains, the new generation. What does that mean in terms of pain? Does it mean integrating young people, perhaps, or actually managing just that, the generations as a whole? Because we can have people who have, what can be now. What are we now? 2020 to 2022. So you could have people who are 19, 20 odd years old in the business, and you can have people who are 40, 45 years older, 2 or 3 generations, 2 generations different. So you've also got the expectation of younger people and their priorities. Yeah, so self priorities. We hear people saying, young people want to be wrapped in cotton wool, but I think it's also, if I may, a very difficult time because when you join an office, when you join a business, you used to spend time with perhaps a senior person or other people, and you'd listen and learn. You'd learn by osmosis. But how do you learn now if you're perhaps in a distributed workforce or you're not seeing people as often as you want? And there's a thin line between expecting higher standards, yes, and too much pressure. So here's the culture thing, is how do we create an environment or a culture where people can be at their best, are enabled to be at their best, training and supported and so on. Digitization, we'll talk about a little bit about that, but very interesting. And contradicting values. Oh, that's key. That's so important. You know, the values, what we say we do, what we say our values are, and what they actually are. And perhaps this is the difference between being, you know, culture by default or culture by design, and spending time writing values, or looking at values. This isn't just something that people can just go away and write. It can't be that C-suite just go away and write the values, or you get an organization in, because they aren't your values, they're just words. So let me show you some things that people have said before. So these are from businesses that you will know. I won't name the businesses, but they're real people in real businesses. And this is some of the things that they've said. So line managers are not equipped to lead. That's important. HR operating model is too tactical and reactive. Just read, just see which ones you've noticed. Legacy culture is toxic. And some of you have mentioned the difference between perhaps young and old, you know, new people coming into the business. Did a cultural audit just before Christmas for an asset management company that works from the US, UK, Middle East and Far East. Younger people were much happier with the culture than older people that have been there, not older, but who'd been there longer. Younger people were much more hopeful, but less productive. There are all sorts of things that we were looking at. It doesn't connect to our purpose, doesn't enable our purpose. Disengaged employees, unwilling or unable to change. We said, you know, some 85% of people are not actively engaged in work. So these are some of the pains with culture. So we feel your pain, we understand it. Let's see what we can do about it. So if you were to get it right and create a culture that you wanted, a culture by design, that enabled you to be more efficient and effective, etc. Or perhaps you already have areas of your culture that are really good, a force for good. And please go into chat and make some notes. So what are your gains? What would you like to change with a better culture? Or perhaps where are the gains in your business from culture? What are you currently seeing? Where is the good culture? And how does it benefit you? And then this is the last slide, and then we'll have a break. That's just for you know, for 5 or 6 minutes, just a comfort break. So let's just have a look at this one. So if you want to go to chat and tell me, what are the gains? What would you gain by perhaps having a more healthy or more clearly understood culture? Harmony and teamwork, yeah. And that harmony piece is really nice. Makes it, it'll say it's nice, but it also makes us more efficient, make us more effective. We work better together. We can share things more easily, problem solve, as we mentioned earlier. We have a family culture, and this reflects on how we communicate with clients. Yeah, so that might be your clan type culture. So the benefits of having a clan type or family culture, we're happy, therefore we create happy clients. Speaking the same language is interesting, because it isn't just the whether we speak a different language technically. So you know, engineering language versus financial language, for example. But we understand the meaning of the words we're using. We have the same connection, or the same understanding. That's great. So here you go. Here's what some of your colleagues, or some people, you know, from other businesses said about the gains from culture. And some of these are really important. Somebody mentioned, I forget on the call just now, about digitization. Enable major transformations like agile, digital, customer centricity is a big one at the moment, customer centricity, or innovation. It enables it. When you get culture right, it enables these things to happen. And conversely, it can also derail it. And so many times I've seen people try and make these changes in business. And one of the banks in the Middle East we worked with at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, were very interested in being customer centric, but the culture didn't support that. Made it very, very difficult. Greater employee ownership, psychological safety, Distributing authority. So where are the decisions made? Do we have a culture that's safe, allows people to make decisions, and to give and receive feedback, right? Better ways to measure culture, track sentiment, new practices to enable new ways of working, codified values. So there's lots in there. So what we know is when we get it right, it's irrefutable. It's hugely valuable. So just on those notes, can I invite you to go and have a quick break? Can we say, Manatala, can we say, what do you think? I'm just going to check the timing. It is what? It's about 28 minutes past, about 28 minutes past. So could we have 5 minutes? Would that be
Yeah,
okay? A
sure. I believe
5-minute
we
break?
can do that.
Okay, great. So please, if you'd like to have a 5-minute break and then come back, we will start fairly promptly. So 5 minutes, and I'm just going to get a drink myself. So I will see you in 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Thanks. Right. So let's listen. You're back. So let's carry on. So this is the second part, a slightly shorter half. But let's talk about really. We've talked about understanding culture. Now let's talk about really developing it. And a part of this, we were asked to share with you, a culture operating framework, if you like, an audit. So how can we practically, remember I said earlier, how do we move from sort of theory to practical? How do we put this into practice? So we have an audit, and we'll talk a little bit about it, but primarily, culture, as you said, it's about rituals and customs. It's about the way things get done around here. It's rules and norms. It's pictures on walls. It's how we make decisions. It's how we problem solve. It's what we prioritize and so on. And so here's a framework, an operating framework to help us understand culture, and also to look at some of the measures, for example, that we can put in place. And questions, right, from a survey perspective, how can we really, understand this stuff? So let's just go around quickly and just look at it. So when we think about, if we look at the center first, you can sort of see purpose. Maybe just look at that, purpose, values, and then around the outside of purpose and values, we've got the behavioral stuff, the rational stuff, and the emotional stuff. So this is how we make sense of it. So from a prioritizing point of view is, let's and from behavioral is, how are employees helped to apply these values every day? How do we make decisions against the values, for example, within our culture? How do organizations celebrate good behaviors? How do organizations deliver consequences for poor behaviors? You've heard the term managing poor performance. But if we think about how we behave, how we celebrate good behavior, this isn't just about money, far from it. It might be recognizing or rewarding somebody for doing something in keeping with your culture and values. So for example, a member of your team could be rewarded for turning down a piece of business because perhaps the client has shown a lack of integrity before, or perhaps they don't fit with your values. You look at that, for example, and reward them as such for that. Look at the unique ways of creating a sense of belonging. So what are our values and rituals? How do we give and receive feedback? Are we interested in helping others learn and grow? And there's a business I worked for about 18 months ago, quite famous actually, work out in the Middle East, and they absolutely do not want feedback. They will not give it, and they do not want it. Despite everything they say about their culture, it's a very, very difficult place to work, primarily for me anyway, because of that reason. And because they don't want feedback, it's very hard to improve. So how do organizations create an environment where it's safe to take personal risks? And I'm going to give you a specific example about that later. Do people feel safe to give and receive feedback? Do they prefer to take risks? And it can be risky, by the way, for individuals to give particular managing up, more senior people. How is authority distributed? How is decision making made? Is it only the few that can make decisions, or is it for many? And is that understood? Communication is important, not just within the teams, but across different teams. Hence this word collaboration. And how rules how they're all supporting expected behaviors. How do we share these behaviors? I said to you, is it that we fiddle expenses and we have to tell people, or is there, the positive side of that? So that's the framework that we're going to use, or that we tend to use, and I'll come back to it in terms of an audit perspective. But just a little bit of sort of positioning, if we can, for culture. On the left-hand side, Pete Drucker's model. I'm sure many of you have seen it. You've heard it many times. You'll hear it many more times. I'm not even sure how old this model is. Is it 20, 30, 40 years? I'm not sure. Perhaps somebody will tell me in chat how old the model is. But it looks at the relationship between leadership and leadership behaviors, the culture, and strategy. Now, say the old expression was, culture will eat strategy for breakfast. That was the kind of the punchline. And to some degree, that's true. It might be misinterpreted, because actually what we need a strategy to develop our culture, and we need a culture to develop and live the business strategy. And what probably is true is that you can write the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have a great culture, there's no way that strategy is going to get delivered to the degree to which it could or should. And the slide earlier that mentioned 66% of CEOs rate culture more important than strategy, remember? So this is how important we're taking it. But it's not easy for leaders, for managers, for me, you, we, because leaders get the culture, they behave. Leaders, you can't just talk about culture, you have to behave it. Leaders and managers are the most watched population in the business. So how you behave, how you respond, how you talk to people, customers and employees, that creates the culture. So if you don't make it safe for people to give and receive feedback, to innovate, to take challenges, they won't. Okay. But leaders, you also have to write the business strategy. So there's a lot here. So you may be responsible for writing, if you're C-suite or senior here today, might be responsible for writing the strategy, or if your team leader is responsible for the strategy of your team. But you've got to create a culture that will enable people to be at their best and therefore deliver that strategy. Because leaders, you cannot deliver the strategy yourselves. Okay, so really, really important. And just on the right-hand side, that's just perhaps just a graph or diagram, just to give you an idea of the difference between strategy and culture. And you can see that culture is about those behaviors and more the essence of the business, whereas perhaps the strategy on the right-hand side tends to be more of the harder. But you can even say sort of hard and soft if you like. But the fact is the soft isn't soft, it's absolutely vital, but just to give you an idea. So just trying to position that. So here's a couple of brands that I hope we've heard of, you may have heard of or experienced. We've just said that culture must be lived and breathed, and the magic sauce here. And if you've got a pen and paper handy, I would encourage you just to write down 2 words, because as leaders, you absolutely must do this. You must get this right. 2 things. When you think about a clearly defined culture, there's 2 things here. You have to behave it with consistency. So 2 words, consistency and activation. You must be consistent with the culture and you must activate the culture, and activate it at all levels. So for example, recruitment, and Zappos have a very strong, very clear recruitment process, and culture is a key part of that. They recruit to fit their culture, and they don't recruit people who don't fit that culture because it's too difficult, and they're proud of their culture. So let me just give you an idea. So Zappos, they have something, and you may have heard of it. They have something called a pay to quit bonus. So after 2 weeks of being in the company, they test how committed new employees are to their purpose. And the purpose, if you don't, the purpose is to live and deliver wow. Remember we said it's a real sort of clan culture. Make employees happy, employees make the customers happy. So what they do is they pay you to quit. They offer you a bonus to leave, to hand in your notice to leave. Can you imagine that? And I forget, it used to be about $500, but you were offered a lot of money to leave. And what it does is it tests how committed you are to the business. So there you go. Yeah, it's certainly consistent because they do it for everybody, and that's how they activate it. On another one, think about psychological safety. So Airbnb And I think they're up to about 6,000 or 7,000 employees now, 31 locations, 24 countries globally. They have many meetings. When the executive meetings are finished, all the notes are published. They're all available, so you can see there's your transparency bit. And they also run monthly meetings for teams and for staff. And they have this thing called Elephant, and you can read this, it's online if you're interested. It's called Elephant, Dead Fish, and Vomit. I don't know if you know, vomit to be sick, yeah. Where anyone can raise questions in a safe way. So in other words, the elephant is what's the elephant in the room. The dead fish is what project is I don't know if you know the expression, what project is stinking up the place? What's that bad smell? You know, the dead fish, what can we do about it? And vomit is simply just saying you can talk, just share, just get it out. If you've got any moans or groans, just get it out, share what you think, but in a very safe way. And then finally, Amazon, Jeff Bezos is famous for this. In every meeting, they have an empty chair, and the empty chair is the customer. So as a result, Amazon, and the idea was it was going to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. I don't know whether it is, but that was one of their that was perhaps their mission. I mean, he's an international leader in customer centricity. But whether you like it or not, whether you use Amazon or not, this idea of having an empty chair in the room at meetings says, here is the customer. So we always have the customer present at meetings, and they're represented by this chair. So again, can you see how we're talking about activation and consistency? So really, think about in your business, how are you going to live this stuff? Now, we've mentioned C-suite, we've mentioned CEOs once or twice, and I want to just share with you some quotes here. I'm not going to read them all out. Don't worry, I won't read them all out, but you can take note of them. And there is actually one right in the middle from Zappos. Yeah, if you get the culture right, most of the other stuff will just take care of itself. And that's so true. When you get your purpose, mission, vision, and your culture right, when people know what to do and why to do it, and they're engaged with that bit and they're enabled to do it, they just get on and get stuff done. So as managers, what's interesting, I hope for you, is your lives will be easier when you get this culture stuff right. People will get more stuff, as Tony said, other stuff will get done, and you won't have to worry, and life will be easier, more efficient and effective. Top left, culture isn't just one aspect of the game, it is the game. In the end, an organization is nothing more than the collective capacity, which is what some of you were talking about earlier or in chat, collective capacity of its people to create value. I mean, it's absolutely amazing, isn't it? So just have a think for a minute. What does your senior leadership say about culture? How is culture spoken about in your business or businesses that you know? And if you want to go to chat and just make a comment, that's great. It would help me, certainly. But just have a think about it. Okay, so what is it? What do leadership say about culture in your business? What do other businesses say about culture? Is it a hot topic for your business? Is it a hot topic for some of the businesses that you know? If people are interested in it, who's interested in it and why? What is important though with culture is it's now on the CEO's agenda. It's on the C-suite's agenda, which means some of you might be those people where it's on your agenda. And if it's not, then you're the managers often charged with really bringing this thing to life. If you're in the top tranche of management, middle and senior management, then it is up to you to really bring this thing to life. It is your mandate. Culture is the mandate of middle and senior managers. And what we cannot do is hand off culture to HR. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later and how HR impacts on this. But first and foremost, the role of the CEO is to own and enable culture. Yep. This is on their agenda. I agree. It's exactly as CEO Zappos. Hanan, thank you so much for that. Thanks. So how does culture shape who's the winner? Now, the last couple of years, you know, we've heard lots of people talk about digital and digitization and how do we go digital and all this sort of stuff, right? But the thing here with culture, and I'm going to use banking as an example, if I may, particularly recently, banking industry, often quite hierarchical or market results driven when we think about some of those cultures, yeah, have suddenly had to go digital. And we've seen branches closing and distributed working, people going online platforms, banks giving responsibility to, you know, their customers to go online, more transactions going online than face to face, and the change has been phenomenal. So, and particularly in the last couple of years, I worked many years ago with Barclays, and they created Digital Eagles, you know, young people to go out actually into the branches and teach, older managers how to go digital and to increase their digital transactions, because obviously they're cheaper. But more recently, this has been very significant, as I'm sure you know. So I've just written at the top there, and I think this is, when I say it's really important, all this stuff's important. I know I didn't mean to it's not just this part, but here's why culture really matters. If you have two companies with the same strategy in the same region, it might be Coca-Cola and Pepsi, for example, in the Far East, trying to sell more product. It is the culture that will be the differentiating factor for which of the two companies wins the battle in that marketplace. And so for banks, this has been really interesting, because the 80 major global banks across the world, right, they've had to go digital platforms become digital savvy, right? And the difference here absolutely has come down to culture. So those banks that managed to move digital were able to do so because of their culture. It was due to culture. And those that didn't, and that was down to the lack of culture that was required to deliver that strategy. Now, we also have now, you know, entirely, digitally oriented banks, right, like N26 in Germany. There's many others, that's just one, but they're going really well, N26. And what some of the older banks did, perhaps the more traditional banks, what they did was they made inorganic purchases. They tried to go out and buy companies, and some again were successful. They bought small digital platforms, they bought innovative companies, and then they tried to integrate them, and some were successful. Some actually looked at the culture of the companies they were buying and worked out how to integrate them, where they would fit, and how it worked, and others didn't. And you can look back at those mergers and acquisitions and the integration, those that worked because the banks took time to understand the culture of the business they were buying, learned from it, and integrated better. Some businesses that banks bought, and I know this to be true, the business lasted, the one they bought, 3 months. It was 3 months before people were leaving, and the business, soon after, one they bought, fell apart because they couldn't integrate it, because the cultures clashed and they hadn't paid attention to that. So culture is, and the only message here is, culture is the defining point. So let's just have a look at the role of leaders, and this includes us. This is one of those me, you, or us slides. 85% of cultural change initiatives are not successful. And the number on the left says there 15% of organizations employing more than 1,000 people, but yet rated their changes highly or very successful. And those 85% aren't. And staggeringly, that's very often mostly down to a lack of skills and knowledge or talent in managers and leaders. Yeah, they're not able. 70% variance in strong and weak cultures found. Yeah, in other words, it's the lack of knowledge and skills in the team leader, because businesses don't often equip team leaders to lead. Team leaders may have been successful in their field. They may be qualified, in their products, for example, or been successful in sales, but it does not make them a great team leader. And then finally, leaders are pivotal in connecting employees to winning culture. We've got to listen, we've got to engage with people, and you can see the difference there. So very important that we make this stuff happen. Yeah, we've got to live this stuff. Now, let me ask, is anybody here today got a role in HR? Anybody in HR before I start talking about this then? Is anybody in HR? It'd be great if you could send me a message. Who's in? Oh, we've got who's in HR. So we've got somebody from HR. Hurrah. Is it just one? Just one person? Used to be HR. Okay. So let's just talk about the role of HR just for a minute, because let's face it, it's changed massively.
دعونا نتحدث عن دور الموارد البشرية. لقد تغير دور الموارد البشرية بشكل كبير. إذا نتغير دور الموارد البشرية، ودعونا نوضح الأمر. لطالما كانت الموارد البشرية القسم الذي يقود ثقافة المؤسسة، ولكن متطلبات العصر الرقمي توسع مهام ومسؤوليات الموارد البشرية. نتحدث عن بعضها، مثلا مع تحول الشركات إلى النمط الرشيق لابد للموارد البشرية من أن تدير التغييرات في الممارسات وفي السلوكيات من أجل تنفيذ الاستراتيجيات بالسرعة المطلوبة. غالبا ما لا تكون أو لا يكون موظفو الموارد البشرية مجهزين لذلك، ولا بد طبعا موظفو الموارد البشرية يعملون أيضا على إعادة تحديد القيادة وأدوار القيادة. إذا يتعين على الموارد البشرية أن نقوم بالكثير، وفي هذا العالم حيث عالم العمل عن بعد لابد للموارد البشرية من أن يبنوا مكان عمل جديد ويسمحوا على الرغم من هذا البعد للموظفين أن بالشعور هذه الوحدة أو هذا التناغم. وهنا لدى الموارد البشرية فرصة كبيرة لكي يعملوا بشكل استباقي، لكي يبادروا، لكي يتحدوا النماذج التقليدية وأن يعيدوا تعريف النهج ويبحثوا عن سبل جديدة لتحقيق الأهداف المرجوة وتحقيق التغيير. لكن نموذج تشغيلي للموارد البشري قديم يتسم بالكثير من الجوانب التقليدية المرتبطة بالامتثال، المخاطر، المساءلة إلى آخره، ملء الاستمارات، وهذا الأمر لا يساعد في تحقيق التغيير. على مدى 40 عام من الممارسات التقليدية في الموارد البشرية، طالما رأيت أن الموارد البشرية يمكن أن تشكل القسم الأهم أو الأكثر تميزاً في الشركة لدفع الموظفين قدماً، ولكن هذا القسم غالباً ما يبطئه بسبب العمليات والإجراءات. إذن قسم الموارد البشرية هو وظيفة أساسية، وظيفة تعمل كخدمة أساسية، من الصعب أن نرى هذا القسم يقوم بتدريب القادة والموظفين حين يكون موظفو الموارد البشرية خاضعين لقيود معينة في عملهم. زوجتي في شهر نوفمبر الماضي كانت بحاجة إلى 10 إلى 12 شخص للتوظيف بحلول شهر فبراير، ولكن القسم الموارد البشرية كان بطيئا جدا في العمل، ولم تحصل على هؤلاء الموظفين الجدد إلا في 31 من يناير ليبدأوا في الأول من فبراير، والإعاقة كانت من قسم الموارد البشرية. إذا لابد لقسم الموارد البشرية من أن يتحلى بالمزيد من الرشاقة والسرعة في العمل، ولكن طريقة العمل الحالية تقليدية قديمة، لا تعتمد الموارد البشرية النمط الرشيق المطلوب حاليا. إذا ما هو التغيير الذي نريد أن نحققه حاليا؟ صحيح أن نتحدث عن الثقافة اليوم، ولكن لابد من أن نبقي في ذهننا نقاط معينة. أدعوكم أولا إلى الإجابة عن هذا السؤال: ما هي إدارة التغيير؟ ما الذي نفهمه بإدارة التغيير؟
So now we are starting the game. Please follow your screen to answer the questions as soon as possible. Congratulations, Arctic Boa. If we may ask you to open your camera and mic on Zoom so we can see who you are to congratulate you.
Hi.
Mr. or Mrs. Boa,
Yeah.
welcome and congratulations.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you today, and we will contact you soon for your voucher.
Thank you very much.
So, Paul, I believe Mr. Daniel is our winner for today.
Congratulations. So well done for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for participating, everyone, this morning. Have we got, Manatala, have we got time for any questions, or does anybody have anything they want to ask? They can do that in chat, or we can do that verbally, or afterwards. Actually, if you go away from this presentation, you have some thoughts. If you want to feed them back to my colleagues, then they can take those questions and pass them on. And if they're simple, I'll do my best to answer them. Or if I'm more complicated, if it's more in depth, then maybe we'll try and set up a quick session or conversation with you, perhaps on Zoom or something, and see how we can help. Yeah. Have we got some?
I believe we can.
Do you want me to put up some contact details, or can I do that?
Yeah, you can do that, and actually they can contact us directly at info@algazevents.com.
Let's see if we can put up some. So Q&A, just whilst I do this, you've got any questions, do ask. There's some details for us to say. Happy to try and help directly. If you've got a question that you don't want to ask today, you can put it in chat and I'll try and answer it virtually. Or if you've got a larger question or topic that you want to discuss, get in touch with us and say perhaps we can set up Zoom with a few of us and see how we can help you. But here's the contact details. So any questions now, or so you can ask those verbally if you want to put them in chat, or else send us them and we will do our very best. If it's simple, then we'll answer or point you in the right direction. And if it's a little bit more difficult, a little bit more complicated, then perhaps say we could set up a meeting with a few of us to try and help. Just a few seconds left. If you want to ask anything, do. It's been a pleasure to work with you this morning on a topic that is making a huge difference. And as we said, 2022, it's going to be a great year, I think, particularly supported by those who make the most of their culture. And that means really looking at how people think and feel, tapping into the potential that exists in business, because there's so much potential in business. People are amazing. And one of our jobs as leaders is to create an environment where people can, be the best, share their ideas, and really, tap into that potential, that creativity and knowledge for all our sakes. Thanks for your, that's kind, the thank you notes that people are putting up on chat. That's very, very kind. Helpful session, wonderful. Yeah, listen, if you have any questions, do ask. Otherwise, I think we're about done on time, aren't we? Manatala, would you like to say thank you and close, or Abdul Kom, if you're here?
Yeah, I would like, actually, I have to admit that thank you for this great and rich session, Paul, and thank you for your
I've
time
loved
and
it.
effort as well. That was really great. And as a strategic and exclusive partner in the region for Mr. Paul, we would like to thank you all for being a part of this great webinar. For in-house cooperation with Mr. Paul Stevens and more details, please feel free to contact us on info@algazevents.com. Thank you again from Algaz team. Stay well and safe, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was our
Thanks
pleasure.
so much. Bye.